Hello and welcome to Speaking Through the Fog. As always, I am your host, Miranda Larca-Spada, and today I'm going to be talking about something I'm really proud of. I showed it in my support group, and yes, I go to a support group, but I showed it there, and they were really excited about it and wanted to see it, and so it really inspired me. Maybe I should talk about it in my blog, kind of share it, let people out, other people maybe do it too, and that's this book of research, and it's pretty thick actually, but to be fair to me, a lot of it has really big font or is bibliographies because it's all like scientific papers and research other people did with bibliographies and a lot of big diagrams and stuff, so it's really not as much reading as you would think, but I'm sure my doctors are going to think so because I am giving them to my doctors. I make these, the copies are about like $15, but I get them for free. I can't tell you how, unfortunately. And the binding with the clear cover and the black vinyl on the back, if you go to the FedEx place, they do the spiral binding and the covers for $5. So if you can get the copies or print them out yourself, that's not really that bad. So I did a table of contents, and I put in my plan of treatment, so what I would want my treatment to be. I'm sure my doctor will have something else to say about that. And then some useful graphs and charts that I found on a doctor's website that treats chronic fatigue syndrome, and then I broke it off into different segments, and each segment is sectioned off with cardstock so the doctor can easily find what they want to see. I also use it when I go to talk to people. I'm going to see one of my new friends that I met at my support group tomorrow, and I'm going to bring this along so I can remember what the heck I've been researching. But it's got the newest overviews on chronic fatigue syndrome, and so I have the CDC report about out of 2015 where they redefined it as systemic exertion intolerance disease and redefine how it should be diagnosed and treated. There's the Harvard Health publication on what they think chronic fatigue syndrome should be defined as, and there's a CDC one that came out in 2003, which I really like, with the Canadian definition of chronic fatigue syndrome. And then after that, I have it separated into cause, the recent research into biological effects of chronic fatigue syndrome, treatments, and random information. Now, cause, I have a paper on a stomach virus they found. I talked about that in the segment on the hypotheses brought forward on cause. The gene signatures that they're working on, the vagus nerve infection, which they found post-mortem in plenty of chronic fatigue syndrome severe sufferers, whether or not that's a cause or a effect by the chronic fatigue syndrome, that's still up for debate. Let's see, mitochondrial failure, if it's a human form of hibernation, or mold exposure. There's also, I might get a guest speaker on actually about this, about vitamin depletion and malabsorption, and there's also candida in the stomach is another theory. I don't know very much about it, so I didn't put much in here, and I'm kind of on the fence as to whether or not that's a cause or it's something that contributes. And then there's also one that I forgot to put on the table of contents that I have in here, which is that the body's in a constant state of arousal, which at first meant something of a sexual nature, but no, it just means that it's constantly on alert for an unknown virus, and it, eventually gets tired and all that. And then there's, in the recent study into biological effects, I have the brain abnormalities that Stanford found. oh goodness, the immune deficiencies that they found, the chemicals that point to a neuroinflammation, and some more mitochondrial research, and the CPET test, what it is and why it's so good. And again, this is for my doctors, so just to kind of say why I want the CPET test. And then under treatments, I put the paper on why the PACE study is so horrible, and why graded exercise is not a good cure for people with chronic fatigue syndrome, and how cognitive therapy is, while helpful, is not a cure as well. Chronic fatigue syndrome and how to treat it. It's about that same doctor that I said I put some graphs in. He just goes over all of the different treatments that he knows of that other doctors and him talk about, and whether or not they're good. And then improving your life despite chronic fatigue, so some of the natural things you can do. And then I have 2 about the antiviral treatments. And then I have 2 papers discussing the difference between chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia. And then random information, another description of CFS, but this one is more, it's got a lot of quotes from doctors in it, an opinion about somatic symptom disorder, and how it's going to really affect people or doctors' view on it's all in your head. So maybe just a little jab at the doctors for me, like, you should probably read this. Thoughts about ME, which are quotes from doctors and researchers. My paper, Speaking Through the Fog, because I figure if they're going to diagnose me, it's the best description I have of what's going on with me. Some documentaries I think are worth watching. If I could afford it, I would totally buy just numerous copies of these and hand them to my doctors and say, I bought them, so you can take the hour it takes to watch them. And then an ME awareness flyer, and a flyer to my donation. So when I talk about getting the CPET test, I know what I had to go through to even get it. So yeah, so I hand them this and say, if you're going to treat me, you're going to have to read this, and this is the most recent research, and if you're willing to read this and see what it says and maybe treat me based on the most recent research, then me and you can probably work really well together. But if you're going to go by what the current policy is in the hospital, or what your peers are saying, or whatever, it's going to be really hard, because right now doctors don't get very, if at all, any training in med school, and doctors aren't required to keep up with recent studies. So if you have a doctor who's been in practice for 30 years, their knowledge on chronic fatigue is 30 years old, if they got any at all. So if they're any kind of doctor, they should be excited about getting new information, and treating a patient should really be about what's the best for what they have. So I gave it to my therapist. My therapist was super excited I did the research for him, and he said he read through the whole thing, whether or not he did, and he sounded like he did, though, when I talked to him. And so there's my integrative, and I can't remember what he's something else. Anyways, doctor already is up on the research, so I didn't have to do that for him. I'm going to give it to my primary care doctor, which I see next week, and when I fly back to the Mayo Clinic, I'm going to give it to my Mayo Clinic doctor, even though I think she probably will be insulted and won't really believe me, because the Mayo Clinic is still very stuck on the fact that it's a cognitive therapy issue. But then at least I can feel like I tried to help some people in the future who go to them. And then to my chiropractor, who's another person on my health team. So that way, everybody that I have on my side all have the latest information. So I suggest you do the same and don't, use if you want to do that, don't feel like you have to use what I used. Do the research on your own. Use me as maybe a starting point or something, but it's always, the best thing you can do at this point to battle the medical profession is to have the knowledge yourself and have the medical scientific evidence to back yourself up, because we're fighting a really hard battle here. We're fighting a harder battle than anybody else with chronic illness sufferers and invisible illness sufferers, not just chronic fatigue sufferers, chronic fatigue syndrome sufferers, all have to really take up their arms and battle harder than, somebody who with their doctors, so this is just a weapon, a tool in your arsenal, not even a weapon, more like a shield, like, here, treat me right. So really excited about it. I hope it helps somebody. I hope it maybe somebody will take it and be really excited about it. So thank you for watching, and hold on tight for another Speaking Through the Fog.